This video is about crime. True crimes that actually happened. It's about violence and real victims. You can find more detailed information in the description.
Early November 2005, Robert Spahalski turns himself into the police and confesses to a murder. When his twin brother Stephen found out about it, he says, "I thought I was the only murderer in the family." But Robert's act is not his only crime and by no means his first. Rochester, New York, United States. A tranquil town with around 200,000 inhabitants. Yes, violence is not a foreign word in Rochester. The place has a comparatively high rate of unsolved homicides. Murder walks in and out of here like an unpleasant guest. For example, the Alphabet Murders, a series of unsolved child murders, caused a stir in the early 1970s. Robert Spahalski is one of those Rochester residents, and he's violent, a drug addict, a pimp and a murderer. But his story begins in Elmira, a small town a little further south. It is December 12, 1954. The day Stephen Spahalski was born. His twin brother Robert is born 5 minutes later. Robert will later describe his childhood memories as good. They grew up in a large, intact family home. A happy childhood. The twins are good boys. The Spahalski twins grow into big, strong guys. Athletically built. They enjoy gymnastics. The dream of Olympia haunts Stephen's mind. The brothers are ambitious, are constantly in athletic competition with each other. They still only goad each other to better sporting performances. But soon after that it's all about tests of courage that become more and more dangerous. In their off time, they do gymnastics in dilapidated buildings and do handstands on bridge railings. Adrenaline and fraternal competition drives them on. The tide is slowly turning. And then there's the pig thing. Robert Spahalski gets a rifle, shoots one of his father's pigs in the head. When asked why, he says, he wanted some chops. Young Robert has learned something: he enjoys killing. The Spahalskis lose their footing in life. The parental home is shaking. Stability collapses when the father starts a relationship with his secretary and leaves the family. The brothers get off track. Slowly, but surely. The twins' competitions are no longer about athletic achievements. It's about something else. At 15 they start using drugs. Robert takes everything he can get his hands on. He reportedly throws 300 LSD trips in less than a year. It is questionable whether consumption will remain without a trace. The brothers commit minor offenses at first, which gradually increase, as a contest. It's a game. A kick. Do you dare to enter this house? I bet not. But it is also a necessity to finance one's drug use. They break in, steal cars and become increasingly conspicuous. Due to their physical appearance, their past as well-known local athletes and the fact that pairs of twins are rather rare, they soon also find themselves in the sights of the police, although the Spahalskis operate at night. They commit burglaries, steal cars. But it is difficult to determine which of the Spahalskis committed the crimes, because the brothers are in competition with each other. They go on tour individually. Testimonies cannot prove which twin was seen. But it's Robert who, in people's eyes, is the more evil twin. He's the violent one. The one you fear. The Spahalskis develop a new method to get money for drugs. They prey on gay men, because they are vulnerable, forced to act in secret. Then, the escalation, November 24, 1971. The first murder. 1971, the Spahalskis are 17 when Stephen is the first of the twins to cross the final frontier. He kills a human for the first time. Ronald Ripley, a 48-year-old store owner, falls victim to Stephen Spahalski's anger. Stephen knocks the man out with a hammer, then stabs him until Ripley is dead. The crime gets Elmira excited. In contrast to nearby Rochester, the small town is tranquil. Peaceful. Until now. The investigators soon come across the Spahalski twins, who now have a certain reputation. Even more, Ronald Ripley's car is found not far from where she lives. A witness reports. He saw the car on the night of the crime in the area where it was found, and 2 tall young men. Suspicion first falls on Robert. The evil twin. Robert is brought in for interrogation, subjected to a lie detector test. Robert thinks it's funny. The investigation puts Stephen Spahalski under the microscope. It is Stephen who gives himself away. On the phone, he threatens someone that the same thing that happened to Ronald Ripley will happen to that person, too. The phone call is bugged. During the subsequent house search, Ronald Ripley's car key is found in a sewer pipe. May 4, 1972, Stephen Spahalski is arrested. During interrogation, he confesses to the murder of Ron Ripley. Stephen later testifies that Ripley approached him in an unwanted way and made homosexual advances. Later it is said that Stephen Spahalski and Ripley, 30 years his senior, had arranged to have sex. The truth may lie somewhere in between. Only Stephen Spahalski knows what really happened. But he stays silent. In 2005 he will say that if he kills someone, it is for a reason. And that Ripley deserved every stitch. Stephen Spahalski doesn't want to say more. 1979, Stephen Spahalski is released from prison. Stephen Spahalski's further life is an up and down, back and forth. In prison most of the time, once he's truly free, it doesn't take long before he re-offends and ends up in prison again. For example, in 2009 when Stephen Spahalski tried to rob a bank. The prosecutor then speculates that Stephen has become so used to life behind bars that he can't cope outside of prison life. The killing of Ronald Ripley by Stephen Spahalski was the first such act by one of the twins. It was actually Robert as the driving force, the violent, the evil twin. November 8, 2005, Robert Spahalski is known to the police. He is considered a drug addict, violent. He is also known as a pimp. The tall man turns himself in, confesses to a murder and says the body is in his house. The dead woman in Robert Spahalski's basement is his girlfriend, Vivian Irizarry. Robert Spahalski later states that he was under the influence of crack and heard voices. In another interrogation, he says he saw a demon in his girlfriend. The man himself may not even know what prompted him to kill his girlfriend. What happened? He hit her in the head with a hammer and finally strangled the woman. After his brother Stephen is convicted of the murder of Ronald Ripley, Robert Spahalski carries on as usual. He ends up in prison for a robbery. In the same prison where his brother Stephen is being held. One of the brothers briefly escapes, without ever being able to determine with certainty which twin escaped. Stephen says it was Robert. That's not for sure. Rochester 1990, Robert Spahalski becomes addicted to crack. The drug awakens his desire to kill. December 31, 1990, New Year's Eve. Moraine Armstrong, 24, actually came to Rochester to study. Somehow she gets lost and ends up in a swamp of drugs and prostitution. She wants to celebrate the end of the year with a neighbor. The man is Robert Spahalski. The two take drugs together, have sex. A fight ensues. Robert Spahalski strangled the woman with an electric cable. The thrill that Spahalski first felt when he shot the pig as a teenager is back. Robert Spahalski killed. Like his brother Stephen. But Robert doesn't stop there. July 10, 1991. The summer is unbearably hot in 1991 in Rochester. 35-year-old Adrienne Berger is also a neighbor and friend of Robert Spahalski. She works in a factory, supports Robert. On the night of July 10, the two have sex. Robert freaks out and strangles the woman. It takes a few days for the body to be found. Local residents complain about the smell and the flies. Due to the degree of decomposition of the corpse, it is initially not clear how the woman died. Robert Spahalski is even interrogated in the course of the investigation. He is suspected, but there is no evidence. At this point in time, it cannot even be proven without a doubt that it was murder. Robert is just able to continue. The price is paid by Charles Grand. October 1, 1991. Robert Spahalski earns his money as a male escort. One of his clients is 40-year-old Charles Grand. The two meet a few times and have sex. Robert needs the money for drugs. But on this day in the fall of 1991, something goes wrong. A fight ensues. When Grand refuses to pay Robert, Robert grabs a hammer and smashes in Charles Grand's skull. Just like Spahalski's twin brother Stephen 20 years earlier in his murder of Ronald Ripley. The victim's wounds are almost identical. Robert robs Charles Grand about $1,000 and flees in the dead man's car. Years later, Robert will describe the murder committed as a result of the argument in an interview as follows: "Dumb. Around this time, two other women from Spahalski's circle disappear. One of them lives in the same apartment building. No one knows what happened to them. When Robert Spahalski confessed to the murder of Charles Grand in 2005, the murder victim's sister was not surprised. One knew Spahalski. Even then he belonged to the group of suspects. What happened between 1991 and 2005 is not known. There were other crimes, of up to 30 unsolved murders, which would fit Spahalski's crime pattern, it is said. A culprit was found for some of these murders. Or an alleged perpetrator. 11 murders of young women in Rochester between 1988 and 1990 attributed to serial killer Arthur Shawcross. A man named John White was also implicated in several crimes between 1991 and 1994. He denied the murders and eventually died of heart failure. He was never charged. Unanswered questions remain. Unsolved murder cases that would suit Spahalski. In the same period, in the same place, partly on the same street. Women who have been seen with Spahalski, it is said. Who were murdered, found like Robert Spahalski's proven victims. Naked, strangled. The track of the victims stretches from 1991 to 2003. A perpetrator was never found. 2006 Robert Spahalski is charged with the quadruple murders of Maureen Armstrong, Adrian Berger, Charles Grand and Viviana Rosari and ultimately sentenced to 100 years in prison. The story of the Spahalskis is unusual. It happens that siblings kill together. Even with twins. But that a pair of twins kill independently of each other is rare, perhaps unique in this form. What makes the Spahalskis killers, whether it's drug use, origin, shared experiences or a matter of genes, remains open. To this day, Robert Spahalski is in the maximum security prison. Stephen Spahalski is said to be living in Elmira again. It is not known whether he is currently at large or has been rearrested. Rochester continues to be a violent place. Robert Spahalski confessed to 4 murders. 4 murders proven against him. 4 murders for which he was sentenced to 100 years in prison. But how likely is it that this perpetrator committed 3 murders in 1990 and 1991, only murdered his girlfriend almost 15 years later and then surrendered himself? How likely is it that Robert Spahalski did not commit any murders during this period between 1991 and 2005? Everyone has to decide that for themselves. Let me know in the comments if you think Robert Spahalski is responsible for other unsolved murders. If you like this video, make sure to leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell to make sure you never miss out on new true crime content available for you.